It's a debate that's raged since Boston Mayor Marty Walsh announced and endorsed it 2 months ago.
Our vision of a 21st century, affordable, sustainable games went up against the nation's greatest cities, and we won.
So should Boston host the 2024 Olympic Games? Can it afford to host the Games? Can it afford not to? Both sides are here. In the Pro Olympics coming to Boston Corner, we have Doug Rubin, a member of Boston 2024 Executive Committee. Doug, good to see you. And for the opposition, Smith College economist and author of Circus Maximus, the economic gamble behind hosting Olympics and the World Cup, Andrew Zimbalist. Andrew, it's good to see you too. Let me start with you, Doug, if I can. From day one, you and your colleagues have said no tax dollars, just like I said to the political leaders here, except that which is already in the pipeline. A Globe story said, if you just look at the proposals that you put before the USOC, part of the things you're promoting in terms of transportation would cost $4 billion more than you guys originally told the public. So are you changing your commitment to the public?
Not at all. I think what we have said and repeatedly said is that there are a number of projects that are already in the pipeline, that are already financed, that would be beneficial to the Olympics. And as Rich Davies says, who is former Secretary of Transportation, there are a number of projects like the Central Artery Project and the harbor cleanup that we've taken already that put us in a position to actually bid for this Olympics.
How about those additional $4 billion, though, that you did promote to the USOC? No?
I think what we have talked to them about is those things that would be helpful to the Olympics but not necessary for the Olympics, and they're part of the process as we move forward and talk to the community about whether they think those are important for the long-term planning of the city or whether they are not.
Let me ask you the same question I asked the governor, as two colleagues, for lack of a better expression. If your commitment continues to be no additional tax money other than that which is in the pipeline, would your committee support a ballot question that said exactly those words? You can word it. Would you support it?
Look, we've been very clear about this, that if people go to the ballot and they want to put that on it, we will not stand in the way of that whatsoever.
If it turns out it said what you guys have been saying, would you support the ballot question? Why wouldn't you?
Because our efforts are now on going out to the community and talking to people. And as someone who's been involved in civic engagement, I think that's the better way to go. But as we said, if it goes to the ballot, we will not stand in the way of that.
You have said repeatedly they can't deliver on this promise of a low-cost games. L.A., Los Angeles, was a beacon of low-cost games. So if L.A. could do it, why can't they?
L.A. was the only bidder. The IOC had no leverage whatsoever. They had to take LA's terms. LA not only said that you have to the IOC, you have to financially backstop it, but you have to allow us to use the facilities we used back in 1932. So they didn't have to do any building. It was a very special circumstance. Didn't exist before and hasn't existed since then.
But it's a different day. I mean, everybody says the IOC wants a lower cost, less extravagant game for their own reputation, for whatever reasons. Isn't this the perfect games for that agenda?
Well, I think if the USOC believed what the IOC said, they would have picked Los Angeles instead of picking Boston. At the end of the day, Boston is going to be competing with Rome, probably Paris, probably Hamburg, maybe Budapest, maybe another city or two. And those cities are going to put forward more extravagant bids, and Boston's either going to have to respond to that or lose.
Okay, I want to ask you about something the mayor, who is pretty supportive of what you're doing, said on our radio show, Boston Public Radio, the other day. He was asked what % support he'd need to feel like people were behind the Olympic bid. Here's what he said.
I think it would have to be above 70, something 70 plus. I mean, you can't, I don't think 51% is adequate enough.
Do you agree with him? You need 70% support, at least in Boston, to do this?
I think that's the mayor's opinion. We do believe that we need the public support behind
70%?
It makes sense. But I just wanted to go back to something that
Well, answer my question first, if you would, Doug. 70%?
I think that's the mayor's opinion, and we support that, but that we have not.
How do you know what level support it? I mean, the mayor said at the meeting in San Francisco that there was no opposition. How do you know whether 70 or 30 or whatever support?
I was out in California, Jim, and I heard him say that, and that's not what the mayor said. And to be quite honest, it's been very clear from some of the media, and the USOC made very clear that they were very aware of the No Boston effort and the fact that we actually had maybe some of the most organized opposition here in Boston and still chose Boston because they believe in our plan.
You want to say something to Andrew? Say it.
I do. I don't think there's actually so much difference between the two of us on this. In particular, some of the writings that you've had around L.A. and Barcelona. L.A. you think was a success in part because they used existing facilities. Barcelona because they built into the long-term planning for that city. Both of those pieces, long-term planning and temporary or existing facilities, are cornerstones of Boston's bid. So I actually think we are much more in line with Professor Zimbalist then people think this is a bid based and learn from some of those examples and hopefully builds on that as we move forward.
I'm going to help you out. I'm going to add one to that list. Shirley Leung wrote a piece in the Boston Globe. She spoke to the guy who was essentially the John Fish, the leader of this, of New York. They lost in 2012.
Right.
He said things like, we hadn't had a subway extension in 50 years until this planning began. We hadn't had X, Y, and Z. So isn't the planning itself of advantage, just like Walsh, Fish, Doug Rubin, and all these people say? Isn't that a plus?
So I think it's like cutting a stick of butter with a sledgehammer. Obviously, cities should plan, and one of the side advantages of this whole process is that people are now talking about visions for the city. But I don't think you need to host the Olympics to have the planning. We need to learn how to plan without hosting the Olympics. As the mayor himself said, this is a once-in-a-century opportunity. If we only plan once in a century, we're not going to be in very good shape.
Andrew Zimbalist, when I read your book, which I did, and when I hear you, it seems to me what you're basically saying is no Western nation should host this Olympics because of the huge historical cost overruns. Fine for Sochi, fine for Beijing, not essentially for the... Isn't that what you're saying?
Not at all. No.
So,
no, in fact, I think it's more of a disaster for Sochi.
So you don't think anybody should end the Olympics?
No, you're putting words in my mouth.
Well, you put them in your own mouth.
I think that if Los Angeles got the bid this time around and they used existing facilities, it might have made sense for them. Look, at the end of the day, a question that needs to be asked is, what is Boston going to get if we do host them? Whether the cost is $8 billion or $20 billion, I think it's going to be 20, but whatever it is, what is it that we're going to benefit from? We're going to get in the world map, they tell us. We're on the world map, and being on the world map for previous hosts hasn't helped them generate more tourism. It hasn't helped them generate more foreign investment, and hasn't helped them generate more foreign trade.
You're going to have to answer that next time. What's your website if people want to check it out?
BostonOlympics.com.
Almost forgot for a second. That would have been horrible. And Circus Maximus is your book, correct?
It is, sir.
Gentlemen, good to see you both. Next time we'll have more time, I
show.
promise you. Thank you so much, Doug Rubin. Thank you so much.